sometimes in our walk with God, the weight can be very heavy. You can experience bouts of discouragement. Sometimes you feel like it takes too much, it costs too much to follow God, and it does. The cost is pretty pricey in order to follow God, and sometimes the weight is heavy. I want to encourage you all with something that the Lord told me years ago when I was feeling away, right, about following God. I guess I must have had been going through a lot in my life at the time. And I remember saying to the Lord after a church service, I was sitting in my car and I was like, God, like, why did you not just make us all? Why didn't you just create us all to serve you? Like, why do we have to go through all of this? And you want to know what the Lord said to me? He said, if I made you serve me, how will you know how good I am? And I began to pause and think about that. And I was like, wow, my God, right? And so as I'm going through the issues of life, I began to look back on the ways that God has made, on how God has delivered me from various situations. I began to look back over my life when God has healed my heart, okay? When I am the one that caused my heart to be broken because I was disobedient to God. And I just look at how the love of God has pulled me out of some of the darkest places. I look at how God has been my best friend when I've had no one to rely on. I look at how God has been my father, right? I look at even how God has been mother. I just look at how God has been my provider. Like, there's so many different positions and roles that God has filled in my life. And even, when I turned my back on him and how he didn't judge me, he welcomed me back with open arms. And so I want to encourage those of you that feel like it sometimes, it take too much to serve God. I get it. I understand that. I was even struggling with some of those thoughts, this morning, right? Sometimes I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like pressing in, right? But those are just feelings. Feelings are fleeting. They pass. And like with any other relationship, our relationship with God is one that must be cultivated. Hallelujah, Jesus. And one thing about it, regardless of how I feel, I know that my heart's posture is to please the Lord. I know that my heart's posture is to do the will of God. I know that there is no other place I would rather be. And so if deep has to call to deep and I got to come up a little higher, hallelujah, then so be it. Because there is no place I would rather be than in the presence of the Lord, than in the will of God. And so be encouraged, people of God. Hallelujah. Press in his presence. Press. Pick up your cross and continue to follow after the Lord. I can